excited. We have got a big story today. Our big question for tonight is who is God? And we're going to be exploring the whole book of Exodus to see who God is. And I want you to remember two big ideas today. One, God hears the cries of God's people and rescues them. Number two, God provides leadership, necessities, directions, and boundaries. God provides everything the Israelites need and everything we need. We've been talking about listening to these stories with imaginative listening. And as the Israelites retold their stories, they invited each other to Zachor. It's a Hebrew word and it means to remember. But Zachor is more than just recounting the events. It's calling to relive and participate in the stories. So when Israelites listen to these stories of faith, they put themselves in the stories right alongside their ancestors. I love doing this by thinking about what I would have done if I were in the story. Which character do I relate to most? How is what is true about a character also true about me? How is what is true about God in the story still true about God in the story of my life? Let's recap where we've been so far.
The Bible is a sacred story, echoed to us from the ancients. An epic, revealing the great Creator's pursuit of wholeness for all of creation. May we find ourselves in this amazing story. The Creator, a great and mysterious being called God, hovered over the dark waters of the earth. As God spoke, creation took shape. God pushed back darkness from light, separated sky from water, and surfaced land from the seas. God filled the air, land, and water with every kind of creature. Then, God formed a new creature to reflect God's own image. Humans were entrusted by God to care for all living things. Looking over creation, God thought, "This is very good." Then God rested and set aside a day for humans to rest and enjoy being with God. God tried to protect the humans from knowing too much too soon. But the humans ignored God's instructions. They gave in to temptation, believing they could have God's wisdom right away. Soon, they began to experience struggles, pain, and death. Before long, civilizations emerged, but humans couldn't live peacefully apart from God's ways. Selfishness turned into hatred, murder, and war. The earth was filled with chaos. God's heart broke. So God sent a terrible flood, washing it all away. But God never gave up hope. In fact, God promised to bless the entire world again. It would all start through a man named Abraham. God made this sacred promise to him. God said, "Look around, as far as you can see. This promised land is for your family. Look up and try to count the stars. That's how many will be in your family. They will be my blessing to the entire world." Abraham and his wife Sarah laughed in disbelief. How could this come true? We've never been able to have children, and now we're too old. But they weren't too old for a miracle. After 25 years of waiting, they had a son and named him Isaac, which means laughter. Just as God promised, the number of Abraham's descendants grew and grew. These special people were named after Israel, Abraham's grandson. Israel had 12 sons of his own. When famine struck their promised land, they moved to Egypt. There, the Israelites' numbers grew and grew. Egypt's King Pharaoh felt threatened by them and forced them into slavery. In their suffering, the Israelites cried out to God. Next, we'll hear about Israel's remarkable rescue from slavery in Egypt. Let's continue this story right now.
As always, let's gather around our campfire to retell the stories. Today's story is in 3 parts. Scene 1, slavery. Scene 2, rescue. And scene 3, God provides. Here we go. Scene 1, slavery. So Pharaoh gave the order to throw all the newborn sons of Israel into the Nile to drown. Whew. Yikes, what a beginning of the story. And one Israelite woman in desperation, she put her baby in a basket and set him in the river and floated him down the river, hoping that someone would rescue him. And it just so happened that Pharaoh's daughter heard the baby crying and felt sorry for him. So she lifted the baby out of the water and took him home as her own. And she named him Moses, which means to lift out or to rescue. When Moses grew up, he ventured away from Pharaoh's palace and he visited some of his Israelite relatives. He noticed right away how harshly the Israelites were being treated. He even saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. And Moses looked around to see that no one was watching, and he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. But someone had seen what happened and reported it to Pharaoh. So the soldiers came to kill Moses, and Moses, bam, he ran away out into the wilderness. And he lives in the wilderness for a while, and he comes to find a wife and a home, and he becomes a shepherd in this new life. And so one day, while he is watching his sheep, he noticed this bush over there burning, and it doesn't seem to be burning up. And he said to himself, that is amazing. I gotta go see and have a closer look. So he walks towards the bush, and then he hears this voice. It's God calling, Moses, take your sandals off. You're standing on holy ground. And so Moses drops down, hides his face, and God says, I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob. And I hear my people crying out in pain. I haven't forgotten my promise to bless you and to protect them. I have chosen you, Moses, to meet with Pharaoh and lead them out of Egypt back to the promised land. And Moses came up with all kinds of excuses, but God reassured Moses that God would be with him every step of the way. So Moses and his brother Aaron, they confront Pharaoh and they plead, let the Israelites leave Egypt just for 3 days to worship God. If you don't, God will punish the Egyptians severely. And Pharaoh said, I don't know who your God is. This is just an excuse to get out of doing your jobs. I will not let you leave. Get back to work. So to get Pharaoh's attention, God sent a series of warnings that are called plagues. The first plague turned Egypt's source of life, the Nile River, into blood, and all the fish died. The water became undrinkable and smelled terrible. The next plague brought an outbreak of frogs, hopping everywhere in Egyptians' beds, in their ovens, even inside their cups and their bowls. And each plague, Moses would ask Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. And Pharaoh would say, enough, okay, stop the plagues, I'll let you leave. But as soon as the plagues stopped, Pharaoh went back on his promises and refused to let the Israelites go. Moses warned Pharaoh about the final plague. If you don't let us leave now, every firstborn son will die, including your own. People will weep in the streets. They will beg you to leave us, to let us leave. But God made Pharaoh even more stubborn, and he refused to listen. Moses was so furious, and he left this meeting. Scene 2, rescue. So God gave the Israelites all these special instructions on how to be saved from this final plague. And Moses told them each family is to select a healthy, pure male lamb. Be careful not to break any of its bones and prepare it as this special meal for your family. Take its blood and spread it on the front of your door frame on your house. And this blood will be a sign to God that a pure lamb was given in place of your oldest son. So that night, the people of Israel carefully followed all these instructions, including the one to put the blood of the lamb on the doorframe of their homes. And at midnight, loud screams and weeping woke everyone in Egypt. The oldest son had died in nearly every Egyptian home, including Pharaoh's. And Pharaoh and the Egyptians begged the Israelites to leave right away. That night, the Israelites set out to return to the promised land. And while it was dark, God lit their path through the wilderness with this pillar of fire. And when day broke, towers of clouds would appear and shield them from the hot desert sun and guide them forward. And before long, they arrived on the banks of this wide sea. All of a sudden, they heard this rumbling noise of horses coming up behind them in the distance, and they spotted Pharaoh and his armies chasing after them. They had trapped the Israelites, and they started to panic. They screamed to Moses, "Why did you lead us out here just to die? Slavery would have been better than this." But Moses reassured the people, "Don't be afraid. God will provide a way out of this." And so Moses raised his hands towards the seas, and God stirred up this strong breath and blew against the water all night, and the water pushed back the sea, opening up this path for the Israelites to walk across. But Pharaoh and his armies were closing in, and they began to follow the Israelites into the sea on this dry land. But as soon as the last Israelites made it to shore, Moses stretched his hand out against the water again, and immediately this huge wind blew the waters back together, drowning all of Pharaoh and his armies. The Israelites watched in amazement. They burst into celebration, dancing and singing and thanking God for rescuing them. They put their trust back in God and in Moses. This would be a day that the people of Israel would remember forever. Scene 3, Tabernacle. It took only a few weeks after this miraculous exodus from Egypt, for this coming through the Red Sea, for the Israelites to start complaining to Moses again. They would say, "Why did you make us leave Egypt? We had plenty to eat there. Where are we going to find food and water in the desert? We are going to starve." And Moses, what did these people want? God had already rescued them from Egypt, saved them through the Red Sea, and now Moses just cries out in frustration, "What am I going to do with these people? They're going to kill me if I don't find water and food soon." So God tells Moses, "I've heard the complaints of my people, and I will provide for my people." So the next morning, the ground was covered with this flaky bread-like food that tasted like honey cakes. And they were all really puzzled by this. And so the Israelites even called it manna, which literally means, "What is this?" But every morning, God provided the manna, giving the people nourishment and strength for the day. And every night, God would blow the winds so that birds would come into their camp, and it would be really easy for them to catch these quail so that they could have meat to eat. God even made water come out of a rock for the Israelites to drink. And throughout their journey, God guided the Israelites through the deserts with the cloud that protected them from the sun and the pillar of fire that guided them at night and gave them warmth and light. And after 2 months of traveling after leaving Egypt, the Israelites came to set up camp at the base of Mount Sinai. And all of a sudden, this powerful storm rolled in, and dark clouds covered the mountain, and the people of Israel they were just like trembling in fear. And as the Israelites stood in the distance, Moses climbed up the mountain into these dark clouds, and there on the mountaintop, God gave Moses stone tablets with the commands and laws on them, carved with God's own fingers. You see, these special instructions were given to help the Israelites remember the best ways to live with God and with each other. Moses spent 40 days up on that mountain, 40 days. And when Moses came down, the people weren't sure what had happened to Moses up there, and he finds his brother Aaron and some of the other Israelites having this wild party, trying to worship God through a golden calf they had made. You see, the Israelites shouted, "We wanted to follow a God we could see." But Moses was so angry that he smashes the tablets and they break into pieces, and he's so mad he grinds up the golden calf and he puts it in their water and he makes them drink it. He was mad. He was also confused and sad. So Moses climbs back up the mountain and he begs God to forgive the Israelites. And God says to Moses, "Moses, I am full of compassion and love. I am slow to anger, but I can't overlook this rebellion. So I'm going to show you my amazing power in this special way." So God gave Moses this new set of tablets with the commands and the laws written on them again. And then God said, "Build a special place for me to live with the people that I love." So Moses gathered the Israelites' most skilled craft builders and craftsmen to build this sacred tent, and it was called a tabernacle, which the Hebrew word for this means dwelling place, a place to dwell, live, sit, be. And in this tabernacle, that it would be in the center of the camp, and inside the tent the Israelites would place the tablets with the commandments on them, and they placed those tablets in this special wooden chest called the Ark of the Covenant. And they put it there. And at that time, the Israelites kind of organized themselves into 12 tribes, 12 groups, according to the 12 sons of Jacob of Israel, who was their direct ancestor. And when God's presence came and filled the tabernacle, a cloud would appear, and this cloud turned into fire at night, and it moved the Israelites forward, and they followed God along. And each time they stopped, they had this dwelling place for God in their camp called a tabernacle.